Hello and welcome to the Red Leaf Card, your home for Canadian soccer news and views. My name is Jacob, and today we're going to be talking about the mid-season of the 2024 Canadian Premier League, and also going to be talking about the women's national team for the Olympics for soccer, and also a great signing for the Halifax Wanderers. He's coming back, Sean Rea. And also, here's your fixtures rundown. York United beat Atletico Ottawa 4-1. Vancouver FC gets defeated by Calgary FC 0-1. Forge FC defeats Halifax Wanderers 3-0. Pacific FC gets defeated by Valor FC 3-0. And a friendly match came in for Vancouver Whitecaps. They get defeated AFC Wrexham 4-1. Orlando City defeats Club de Foot Montreal 4-1. New York Red Bulls draws with Toronto FC, but Toronto FC defeats them in PKs 5-4. And also, Halifax Wanderers played Vancouver FC and defeated them 3-2. Atletico Ottawa loses to Calgary FC 1-2. Valor FC wins to Forge FC 2-1. Valor FC is now going on a winning streak. Pacific FC draws with York United 1 apiece. And during the Leagues Cup, Pachuca loses to Toronto FC 1-2. Vancouver Whitecaps defeats Tijuana 3-1. And Atletico St. Louis loses to Club de Foot Montreal 2-3. But in the Olympics for the women's national team, a big drama coming in. But we're going to continue on talking about that. But we have a guest on, and that is one and only Josh Healey, the co-host of the Healey and Bailey Notebook, and also a journalist for the Wanderers Notes. Nice to having you.
Thanks for having me, Jacob.
Great to having you back here. It's a great one to have a great drama coming in from around the world. But we see right now we're in the mid-season for the Canadian Premier League for the 2024 season. And now it gets a little bit heated with all these 8 teams. We have Atletico Ottawa first spot, York United second, Forge FC third, Calgary FC fourth, Vancouver FC fifth, Pacific FC 6th, Valor FC 7th, and Halifax Wanderers 8th spot. Not doing really well for Wanderers in your area.
Yeah, it's kind of been a tale of 2 seasons for them. On the one hand, they have this historically bad start. They're dropping matches right, left, and center, and things aren't really going as well as everyone may have anticipated for the Wanderers. But they've kind of righted the ship in a way over the last 6 matches, I believe. They've got 4 results. They just got a big win, as you mentioned, on Monday, which was Natal Day in Halifax. And, they are still on the outside looking in, but they're only 4 points behind Vancouver and Pacific FC. So if you keep in mind that they also have 2 matches in hand, they're not as far out of the playoff picture as I think some people may have imagined.
Yeah, and it's getting so big right now. A lot of fans just made a sold out in that match, and really showed Halifax Wanderers they're not giving up for that playoff spot. And it gets intensified when you see the other 7 teams looking at Halifax Wanderers saying they might have a chance to come to the playoff spots in this season. And there's always some goods, there's some downs from the beginning, and then later you improve from the beginning.
Yeah, well, that's just it. I interviewed head coach Patrice Geyser yesterday, and one of the things he mentioned is, they've learned and they've taken what's happened to them. It's sort of in the first 5 or 6 matches, and they've grown from it. There's resiliency now in their game. Versus Vancouver yesterday, they were down 1-0 6 minutes in. And they ended up coming back to win 3-2, as mentioned. So this is a group that is, it's had its lumps a little bit early in the year, and now they're really coming together to make a push. I think for anyone who watched yesterday's match, it's hard to argue that Halifax didn't look the better team. They were pretty composed. Their lines were organized, pretty compact, and they were offensively dangerous, which I think is the big thing that has been missing throughout so much of their early season. So just from the press box, it's good to see them rounding in form, because it's always a lot more fun to write about clubs scoring goals and having interesting contests.
Yeah, and seeing how Halifax Wanderers is doing right now, do you actually think that Halifax Wanderers could actually make the playoffs for this season?
I think they've definitely got a shot, assuming they don't have any more players go down with injury. Just yesterday alone, Christian Valesky, who was brought in to be a striker, he's been out. Ryan Telfer, who has arguably been, their most in-form player, he was unavailable. Clement Bahia, who came in as a loan from York United and is actually leading the club with assists, he was unavailable. So I think if they don't lose any more players to injury, they have a real chance of making a push at it. But again, their depth already has been tested. And I think if they have, one or two more key guys go down, whether it be, well, especially on the defensive end of things, they lost Julian Dunn already this year, then you might see them in trouble. But again, if they can keep healthy and get some of those U21 minutes that they desperately need, I think they have a shot. They have a shot because a lot of the clubs ahead of them, Vancouver being an example, Vancouver's only won one match out of their last 10. They're all over the place for form. So that gives clubs like Halifax and Valor, who have been better of late, an opportunity to maybe sneak in there.
Yeah, I do sometimes agree with Halifax Wanderers. They do have that chance to make that seat in the playoffs. And I'm going to say this, but they might actually take that fifth spot. But it does question a lot of fans. Can Halifax Wanderers reach that spot with making all the under 21 minutes?
Yeah, that's a big question. We saw maybe part of the answers yesterday. Jefferson Alphonse came on for his first start as a Wanderer. And, he, of course, came from CS Saint Laurent, which helped knock them out of the Canadian Championship. And he looked pretty darn good, if you ask me. I thought he was incredibly composed on the ball, cool as a cucumber. And that's saying a lot for a young player who, he's only been pro a couple weeks now, but he looked like a seasoned vet out there. The other big thing is that Thiago Coimbra made his return to the lineup after missing several weeks with an injury. And speaking to him, he's had a number of setbacks this year, and I think he was a big part of the squad's plan to hit that U21 threshold, and he just hasn't been available. So with both of them playing well yesterday, that gives Patrice Geyser as a coaching staff two different options to potentially get that U21 threshold and therefore qualify for the playoffs.
Yeah, and now we go to Valor FC, who actually started of not doing really well from the first five matches, and now they're actually doing well for the mid of the season. And now it just lots of fans were like, "Where did Valor go?" At this point, they just beated Forge FC. They just been doing really well now in this midseason. And Phil DeSantos just like, sooner or later we will get this team going. And now they've actually signed some good players, and it was from Saint Laurent.
Yeah, you're seeing a trend across the North American footy world here. I think in since their Canadian Championship run, there's been 4 different CS Saint Laurent players who have been signed by professional clubs. They had one player who ended up going to the Vermont Green, as you mentioned. Two players ended up going to Valor, and then of course one we already spoke about, Alphonse to Halifax. So yeah, they got two good recruits there. They um, I'm trying to remember which one of the Valor players scored their first goal already. But it coincides with their rise in form as well. It just gives more competition for roster spots. And it was actually announced today that Keon Williams, who was so important to their attack and being creative in the midfield, he's officially done for the year. So he is a partial ACL tear, if I remember correctly. So he's done for the season. So it's good that they brought in some players during this window, and they're playing some good football. As you mentioned, they beat Forge 2-1, and that coincides with a couple players being in form. Jordan Swibble has been fantastic. I think he's got 6 goals already for Valor, and then on the defensive side as well, former TFC man Temi Antonoglu, he's honestly been one of my favorite players to watch so far this year. He's just got a wand for both feet. He's got 6 assists already, I think, and he scored his first goal, I think, last week as well. So there's some exciting stuff happening at Valor.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of players that might be a factor for Valor FC, but it just questions for Valor FC of the whole team. Can they actually make it to the playoff spot for this actual season? And there's moments that Valor FC almost made it to the playoffs, but right now it looks like it's going downhill, and then later you feel like Valor FC is now moving closer and closer.
Yeah, it's hard. Unlike Halifax, Valor does not have any matches in hand, so that makes it really difficult. Of course, where that's their true point percentage, as it were, because again, they don't have extra matches to make up. But the same token, they are on a good little run here. They beat Forge, they beat Pacific 3-0 the week previous, and then they had to tie with Atletico Ottawa, going all the way back to July 21st. So, that's 3 pretty good results for them, and something to build on. You can maybe see a little bit more swagger in their step, especially compared to, at the beginning of the season, things weren't going so hot for them. And of course, they had that 7-0 drilling from Atletico Ottawa in the Canadian Championship. So, I don't necessarily expect them to make as much of a run or have as much of a potential to make the playoffs as Halifax, but things are really tight right now. They're only 3 points out, so it's definitely still within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, but it's always that question if Valor could make it, or there's going to be, for example, another team that actually might actually compete against them to those playoff spots. And there's actually some actual good teams that are actually going to try to get that last spot, and it's in the Pacific area. And
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's always the joy of like having an 8-club league, right? You're never really too far out of the picture. And for Pacific, they're tied with Vancouver for that last spot, but they've got a match in hand. So maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room. They might be closer to Cavalry than to Vancouver. But this is a side that has really struggled to score goals. They've scored the least amount of goals in the Canadian Premier League. They've only got 14 on the year. But the good news is they don't concede very many either. Only Cavalry has conceded less at 15. So we'll see what happens with Pacific. They've got, for my money, probably so far the defender of the year in Thomas Mayer-Giguère. He's been phenomenal, and that squad's been good at closing things down. It's just, can they squeeze out a couple more goals to maybe get some wins and start climbing a little bit.
Yeah, as Pacific FC right now, you would say like an even team right now, and it's like saying, well, which BC team is gonna actually take that fifth spot? Will it be Vancouver FC or Pacific FC? And lots of fans are saying they want to go for the Eagles at this point. So yeah,
Yeah,
Eagle
yeah.
like Eagles right now doing really well, staying on number 5, but it always questions the last 3 teams. Can the Eagles, Vancouver FC, make that top 5?
Well, right now you would say no in terms of the last three clubs we've discussed. Vancouver FC is the most out of form, I'd argue. Um, and I haven't put out my match report on wanderersnotebook.ca yet, but over the last even just the 2 meetings with Halifax, they've it's been 7-2 for the goal differential between them. They've got 1 win in their last 10. Even before the match, Afshin Gopi got up and he said, this week they had to sort out mending relationships in the dressing room, which almost, gives rise to the idea that, there's discontent. People aren't happy with the way things have gone, and they're going to have to do something in the next little bit to right the ship.
Yeah, even during the time versus York United, there's been some down plays with the other teams. So it could be a possibility Vancouver FC could actually be in that top 5, but it's a really shocking that they will make it, but it might be really disappointing if Vancouver doesn't make that.
Yeah, especially given their form at the beginning of the year, right? They came out of the gates flying. I remember they had a 4-1 victory to start the season against Valor, and you're saying, okay, what was it that Gopi said? The eagle has landed. The Eagles have landed because they were playing exciting football. They were attacking. All their new signings looked pretty good and kind of had their place, but they seem to have lost that cohesion, and especially on their back line as well. They're making defensive errors. They're not hitting their marks on set pieces, and the result is they're in a free fall. The good news, on the other hand, is that they've got a derby coming up. They're going to be facing off against Pacific on Sunday, so that's a great opportunity. It's one of those like 6-point matches where you get 3 and then you deny 3 from the person who's tied with you as well. So hopefully they have the opportunity and reset for what's going to be a big derby come this weekend.
Yeah. So Calvary FC now have been always that question: will Calvary FC actually make this playoffs? But now we're seeing Calvary FC now in that top 4, top 3, and now it looks like they're actually in the groove of being those top 3.
Yeah, they've had a really, really slow start. But they kind of had a similar trajectory last year where they started off the year. They drew 6 out of 8 matches, if I remember correctly. So, it's not out of character for them to kind of start slow and then build. And I think we're seeing a little bit of this right now. Of course, Ali Musi just came back, and what a difference maker he is. He scored a brace against Atletico Ottawa to steal 3 points there, and if they can have some of that Musi magic, to have those creative players pushing to get some goals, get some opportunities to really create, I think they'll do all right. The big issue for them so far this year has been goal scoring. As mentioned, Pacific it has the lowest amount of goals in the league, but Cavalry's not far off. They've only scored 18 in total across 17 matches, so just just a hair more than 1 per match. And it's really hard to win football matches that way if you're relying on scoring 1 and then getting a clean sheet. Honestly they've done a pretty good job of it. They've only conceded 15 in total, and have a whopping 9 draws, which is kind of speaks to where they've been. They haven't been able to really push things over the line, but Tommy Wilden Jr. is a good coach, and I expect fully that with some of their players coming back, with the influx of their new signing as well. Um, I think there's a chance that they could continue to climb and be closer to the club we saw towards the end of last year that won the league on 13-point difference.
Yeah, I would still say that Calvary FC would make the playoffs, but it does see them that if Calgary FC misses out, might be one of the biggest upsets we would see in the Canadian Premier League season.
Yeah, I would be shocked. I would be shocked if they didn't make it, to be honest. Who knows, right? We saw Atletico Ottawa completely fall apart down the stretch last year, so stranger things have happened. But just given the pedigree of this squad and the fact that they've still got last year's trophy fresh on their mantle, I fully expect that they'll be in the playoffs. It's just that spot for I think there's only really one spot up for grabs right now. That Valor, Vancouver, Pacific, and Halifax are all going to be fighting for.
Yeah, and now we're in this reigning champions right now, Forge FC, third spot. Now,
yep.
Right now they're 3 points behind the second place, and looks like Forge FC a little bit struggling from the beginning of the season, but right now it looks like they got in the groove. But now you look at they just lost to Valor FC.
Yeah, historically Forge has had a bit of trouble with Valor. It seems to be the way. The week previous, you could argue that they look masterful against Halifax. They drum them 3-0. So. It's not too bad for Forge at the moment. I'd say they're kind of cruising along. Out of their last 5 matches, they've got 2 wins, 2 draws, and only 1 loss. So it's kind of typical of of them in the regular season. They're maybe not running away with things, but at the same time, they're just so good. And you have to keep in mind as well that. They played in the Champions Cup already this year. They're still in the Canadian Championship after giving TFC a bloody nose. It's one of those things where you can never count Bobby Smirnionis and his men out, because they just have that history of showing up when it matters.
Yeah, and I still say that Forge FC is gonna just cruise on being in that playoff spot, but looking at it right now, just questions if Forge FC could actually be those regular season champs.
Yeah, 100%. It's again within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, and for actually going, and that's York United possibility nearing in for that number 1 spot. And lots of people look at this team of York United, had a lot of changes, coaching staff, and now a lot of question of being the underdogs for this season and possibly being the regular season champs. And what do you think about York United of this season?
Yeah, obviously they made that coaching change early, and there's no doubt that they got that new coach bump. Benjamin Moira has really re-energized this squad to the point that I think they're the team to beat in the Canadian Premier League as of right now. Atletico Ottawa has faltered a little bit, and we even saw them get dismantled by York United a couple weeks ago in that dominant 4-1 win. Yeah, for my money right now, they're the best team in the Canadian Premier League. And even while we're recording this right now, actually, it was announced that Brem Samaru has left the club um, unexpectedly. This is, of course, reported by the Northern Tribune and John Jack. But there's some things behind that, and one of the reasons is that they've brought in a lot of players already this summer. They brought in a Mexican midfielder, George Guzman, who honestly has been fantastic so far. If I remember, he had 2 assists on his debut, right? So this is a squad that's got a lot of quality on it, and they're hungry. I remember when I was speaking to Ricardo Pascal at the beginning of the season, and he said, our goal is to win championships. And they're proving it so far that they're in contention for the regular season trophy.
Yeah, and York United did actually really well in improving, and during the time they were versing Atletico Ottawa, like it was like a big crowd when they promoted. They were actually having Jorge Campos, one of the biggest legends of Mexican soccer, who played as goalkeeper, probably 30 plus goals as a goalkeeper, and he was a former LA Galaxy player. And now you have Benjamin Mora just shocked Atletico Ottawa. Like now he's two wins, and you had Martin Nash, who didn't do really well against Atletico Ottawa, and Carlos Gonzalez was it was like a kind of a shock for Carlos Gonzalez that York United had a real big change of how they performed.
Yeah, they've shuffled some things around tactically, and as mentioned as well, they brought in some new attacking players, and it's just a different style. They're a lot more tenacious on the press, I'd say. They've done some really interesting things as well with their fullbacks. So yeah, it's we'll see if it can hold is the thing, right? Always, especially in the Canadian Premier League, where you play the same clubs 4 times, you get you have to have other tricks up your sleeve. So we'll see if their formations morph a little bit as they get used to the new head coach. But for right now, they're sitting pretty.
Yeah, and now even bringing in that York United Jorge Guzman, question it always brings question for Jorge Guzman is probably, could he be also a running for one of the awards? Like he actually broke a record for coming in for 3 assists in 2 matches.
Yeah. Who knows, man? We'll have to see, right? Like I think it's hard to come in as a summer transfer window player to win silverware in this league, just because you especially with the amount of skill that's here now as well, right? Like Temi Antonoglu, he has 6 assists and a goal, and is contributing on both sides of the ball. So like there's no doubt that Guzman's got the creativity. And we'll see how he does down the stretch here. Maybe he'll continue at assisting at the clip he's been, but there's some guys I think who may have a lead on him. Like for Forge, for example, David Choignal, I think he's been fantastic, creating for the other attacking players.
Also,
just to name another.
Also including Tristan Borges.
Yeah. Tristan Borges had a great season.
Yeah, and now we could bring in the first place team, Atletico Ottawa. Lots of fans of Atletico thought this was the team that would be the super team. And now you look at the midseason, doesn't look like that they're the super team for this season.
Yeah, some of the cracks are starting to show a little bit. They've only got one win in their last five. They do have a draw in there as well, but it's hard to look at their last two matches versus York United and Cavalry and think, here's the regular season championships. The good news is for athletic fans that they still are top of the table, and they have had such a strong start to the season that they've got room to flounder a little bit, right? If they drop another match or two, they're still already at 29 points. It's not like they're in any worry of being knocked out of the playoffs. It just, they put this squad together to win silverware, and still on paper, it's the most technically gifted squad I think in the league. It's just a matter of getting the best out of them, and that's going to be the work for Carlos Gonzalez and his coaching staff to do, because they don't look like the side that they did at the beginning of the year. For my money, part of that has to do with fatigue. It's a busy schedule, a lot of fixtures. You're flying all over Canada, which is the second largest country in the world, and we can't underrate that. But at the same time, they're kind of a victim of their own planning, where maybe they haven't rotated the side as much as possible. They've been playing some players out of position, like Danny Moore, when they've let go of a left back in Abu Sako, right? So you've got to wonder maybe about some of their decision making this season, as it relates to tactics and player positioning. But there's no doubt that on paper they've got the goods to see this out and lift the second regular season trophy in the club's history.
Yeah, Atletico Ottawa um, looks like you mentioned that Atletico Ottawa sees that they're actually seeing the cracks from them. Even for example, last season, everyone said that they were going to be the regular season champs for last season, but they didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, football is fickle, man. You can go from trophy to the outside looking in pretty quick in this league. And again, that's kind of the fun of a club league, where there is so much room for variation. And even the Wanderers, for example, 2 years ago, they couldn't score a goal unless it was a penalty. And last year they set a record for the most goals they scored. So that's the fun of this league, is that on any given day you can't really bet on what's going to happen, because nothing's guaranteed. That's why you play the matches.
Yeah, I would have to say that what we're seeing in the mid of the season of the Canadian Premier League is actually always surprising of which team is probably going to be in the playoffs. And right now we have Atletico Ottawa and York United, probably two teams that are always to look an eye on who will be the regular season champs. And also looking at the Canadian Championship, you mentioned about Forge FC and also Pacific FC in that battle
Yeah,
with
they've
Vancouver Whitecaps. Now you have Forge FC, who just beated Toronto FC in the first leg 2-1, and Vancouver Whitecaps just actually beated Pacific FC 1-0 in the first leg. Just questions to them, how it's going to look like in the second leg.
Yeah, well, I wrote and had a chance to interview Kwesi Poku of Forge FC ahead of the Can-Champ tilts against Toronto, and they're out there to slay MLS giants, as it were. They've already done it once this season, knocking out CF Montreal, and it's hard to argue after seeing how they came out that first leg that they aren't in a pretty good spot to dispatch John Herdman's side as well. I forget how many times they hit woodwork that match. I think it was at least twice, but you could argue it could have been 4-1 for Forge that match. So I think one of the things that is advantageous to TFC is the fact that there was such a long break in between. Of course, at the time when Forge and TFC met, TFC was in a real rush. I think they hadn't won a match in 12 outings, if memory serves correct, and the one that they did win was versus CS Saint Laurent, the CAN champs. So Forge took advantage of a side that was kind of down on their luck. We'll see where they are at the end of August. I think the next match is August 27th. So it's one of those things where right now, and we'll get to this, but TFC is advanced in the Leagues Cup. It's been an opportunity for them to kind of build a little bit of momentum, maybe rewrite the feeling around their season, and they'll try and use that to springboard into the Canadian Championship as well, and beat Forge at their own game.
Yeah, and now it does question for Pacific FC right now in their upcoming second leg. Do you think that Pacific FC could actually come back in this match?
Yeah, it's good. This is the thing. It's going to be really hard, I think, for them to get the goals necessary. Of course, Vancouver got that all-important away goal, which counts for a loss in a tie. So we'll see if they can muster it offensively. It's a pretty tall task, I think, to ask them to score, a minimum of 2 goals against an MLS side, given the difficulties they've had this year. But that's the magic of the cup, man. It could happen, and they are within striking range of being able to knock Vancouver out. So we'll see what happens, but I can guarantee you that the Whitecaps are going to be equally motivated to get on Pacific early and get some balls on the net, because all they really need to do is get one, and then they could probably sit back, and I don't think Pacific has the offensive weapons to come back from that.
Yeah, and so I know it's the semifinals, but already been news of the upcoming Canadian Championship, which would be in 2025. There's already 2 teams in the Canadian Championship. Is the TSS Rovers, who's won again the League One BC, and also the first season of the League One Alberta, the Edmonton Scottish, coming into the 2025 Canadian Championship.
Yep.
And for this 2025 Canadian Championship, what's your thoughts on a new team coming in to in this competition?
Yeah, it's always good to see fresh blood come in. This past year, for example, we had the miracle run for CS Saint Laurent. Of course, they knocked out the Wanderers. They ended up facing TFC for that 2-legged affair, and that's the magic of the cup. So to have another squad, maybe next year they'll be the big story, and we'll see their players get signed to professional contracts across North America.
Yeah, and I mentioned League One BC. There's 2 new teams that has been announced during the midseason. Langley United would be in there, and also Evolution FC has been announced. So now we're seeing, I think, 10 teams will be in the League One BC.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and still a lot of fans are happy about this, but it's sometimes sad that Victoria Highlanders are no longer, and some people would always say that probably try to get a team in Victoria.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. Obviously, for anything to do with League One, things are complicated, just in terms of trying to secure the finances for a club, because even though it's not at the professional level, it still costs a lot of money to be able to organize everything and put it on. So, best of luck to the Victoria area and in trying to have something at that level.
Yeah, and so now we've seen big problem. Now Canada, I can mention, is that a big problem coming in to the Olympics. It's everywhere, every single time. It's breaking to hear the women's national team, and we hear that the whole staff of the women's national team actually getting banned. And then later we hear the head coach, Bev Priestman, gets a year ban during the
Yeah.
Olympics.
Yeah, so just to clarify that, so Bev Priestman and two other officials have been banned by FIFA for a year after the spying scandal. The other two, of course, are analyst Joe Lombardi, who was the one who was originally jailed by French police after being found to operate a drone in restricted airspace, as well as assistant coach Jasmine Mander.
Yeah, um, I do question about the whole drone thing. Like everyone's calling it drone gate
Yep.
in this whole situation, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. Everyone's already trying to already show the whole thing of the Canadian Soccer Association might actually be a little bit bad, you would say, of what they're doing.
I mean, it's more than a little bit bad, right? This is, for all intents and purposes, an embarrassment, right? After the goodwill that they built at Copa America and all the different things that have really been trending in the right direction for Canada soccer, to have this come out and to find out that this cheating was systemic, it's really a tarnish on all of the hard work that they've been doing over the last number of years to build the program up. So, to their credit, I think the players did their best to overcome this and turn it into a good story with their play. Obviously, now they've been knocked out through a shootout at the Olympics in the quarterfinals, if I remember. But you know, it's there's no doubt that this is a serious issue, and we haven't heard the last of it. Right? They're gonna be doing an independent investigation through Canada Soccer, and we'll hear a lot more, I think, over the next year and a bit about how far this goes down, who is responsible, and the impacts could be wide reaching. It wouldn't surprise me if some sort of sanction came down to John Herdman of TFC, given his involvement with both the men and women's programs, where this is a deeply rooted systemic issue.
Yeah, and even with anyone who got surprised how Canada actually did so well, like they were slapped with -6 points in coming up with the whole group stage. Canada defeated New Zealand 2-1. They defeated France 2-1, and then they defeated Colombia 1-0. And then later they qualified to the quarterfinals. Everything was going well, but you went all the way with a scoreless match. But final score 4-2 in PKs.
Yep. A bit of a heartbreaker, but as you laid out there, Jacob, it's one of those things where you look how far they come out of the group stages. It's not surprising that they ran out of gas. If you think about the emotional turmoil they must have been in, various players expressed, they couldn't sleep, they couldn't eat, and they were sick to their stomachs. It just makes what they were able to achieve that more impressive, that they were able to get out of the group stage, battle their way out of a 6-point deficit, and advance. Having said that, it took its toll, and they just maybe didn't have the pep in their step that they would normally have if they hadn't have gone through such a roller coaster over the last couple weeks.
Yeah, like hats off for the women's national team doing really well in the Olympics with the whole situation. But we'll see how the whole scandal goes in the future to it of this investigation. But to all the players that did really well, they have to give hats off to all of them.
Yeah, again, it wasn't the athletes, right? At least on the women's side, they weren't aware where the information was coming from, and they're a victim in this story. So as mentioned, we'll see what happens as more truth comes to light through reporting from individuals like Rick Westhead of TSN, who has been following this story religiously since it was first broken.
Yeah, and so I know your area had a big announcement just a few days, and Sean Rea. There was a lot of rumors coming in that which teams that he would be playing for, but he's now announced that he's with the Halifax Wanderers.
Yeah, and what a boost for the Wanderers as well. We already covered it, but they're last on the table. They've got some injuries, and to win the Sean Rea sweepstakes has just been a huge lift, I think, for the club and the supporters around it. As I reported for my publication, throughout this process, Atletico Ottawa has been the club on everyone's lips, but for cap reasons, they just weren't able to swing it. Overall, it seems like Halifax kind of came in to swoop at the last minute to get his signature, but they weren't the only ones interested as well. York United also had an offer on the table, although I don't know their terms. For Atletico Ottawa, I'm told that they had a 1-year contract plus an option, and the Wanderers were able to give him 2 full years. So that gave him some security after going over to Spain, and then, of course, being released by CF Montreal earlier in the fall. So yeah, it's a huge get for the Wanderers, and I think it'll be really important going down the stretch. He's made an impact. Like yesterday, I think he nutmegged 2 people in the first 5 minutes that he was on the pitch, and he was, he looks like a player who's playing to show that CF Montreal and his club in Spain made a mistake by not keeping him around. So he's a former U21 Player of the Year, and I expect he's going to be a big part of the Wanderers' attack moving forward.
Yeah, and hoping the second half of the season we'll see Sean Rea show his best and see how he does.
Yeah, 100%. It remains to be seen. He didn't play very many matches when he was over in Spain, so he might be I may have thought he might have been a little rusty, but across 34 minutes of playing time yesterday, he looked pretty sharp to me. So yeah, I don't before too long. I expect he'll be in the starting 11.
And now we've made the halfway point of the Canadian Premier League, and we'll see how it goes for the second half of the season. And that's full time of the Red Leaf Card. I'm your host, Jacob, subbing out.